Oh man, oh man, oh man. Hey everyone, welcome back. So, I have to tell you this absolutely hilarious and mortifying story about the day I realized, really realized, that I didn't actually understand English as well as I thought I did. Picture this. There I was, super confident, thinking I was basically fluent, ready to conquer America. And then reality just absolutely destroyed that illusion within like 5 minutes of landing. I'm not even joking. So, grab your favorite drink, get comfy, because this story is equal parts embarrassing and educational. And I promise you're going to learn something valuable from all my awkward mistakes. Let's dive in. Alright, so here's the setup. I had been studying English for 8 years in my home country of Brazil. 8 years. I could read advanced texts, write essays, pass standardized tests with really high scores. When I moved to Boston to start my graduate program, I was so confident. Like, I'd been at the top of my English class for years, right? I thought I was ready for anything. But oh my God, on my very first day in America, reality hit me like a truck. I landed at Logan Airport after this long overnight flight, exhausted, disoriented, probably looking like a zombie. I approached customs, and the officer looked at my documents and started asking me questions. And I couldn't understand a single word he was saying. Not one word. He spoke quickly with this thick Boston accent, dropping his R sounds using casual contractions I'd never heard before in my life. He goes, "What are you here for?" And I just stared at him, completely blank, like my brain just stopped working. He repeated it, slower, but still completely incomprehensible to my ears. I'm standing there sweating, my heart racing, thinking, oh no, they're going to send me back to Brazil on the next flight. Finally, he enunciated very carefully, almost like he was talking to a small child. What are you here for? Only then did I understand. My face was burning with embarrassment as I stammered out something about attending graduate school. This was definitely not the confident, smooth start I had envisioned in my head. That first week in Boston was basically a crash course in humiliation and real-world listening challenges. I quickly discovered that the carefully pronounced, neutral textbook English I had learned from my non-native teachers, that bore absolutely zero resemblance to how Americans actually spoke, like none. On my second day, I went to a coffee shop near campus. Simple, right? Just get coffee. The barista asked me something that sounded like, "Vier ordink?" I was like, "Excuse me?" She repeated it. I still didn't get it. "Sorry, could you say that again?" By the third time, people behind me in line were getting visibly annoyed, and I finally understood she was saying, "For here or to drink." But in this rapid, connected speech where all the words just blurred together into this incomprehensible sound blob. By the time I figured it out, there was this long line of impatient people behind me giving me death stares, and I just wanted the ground to swallow me whole. So embarrassing. At the grocery store, when I asked where to find rice, the employees said something that sounded like, "Aisle 7 on a left, can't miss it." And I'm standing there trying to decode this like it's some ancient language. It took me a solid moment to parse that into aisle 7, on the left, can't miss it. The way native speakers connected words together, dropped sounds, and used casual phrases was completely, utterly different from anything I had ever practiced in a classroom. It was like I had learned one language and they were speaking a completely different one. But the real challenge? That came when classes actually started. I foolishly assumed, that in an academic setting, professors would speak clearly and formally, like professors in movies. I was so wrong. My marketing professor spoke at what felt like lightning speed, like superhuman speed. He used tons of idioms and cultural references I didn't understand, and he frequently mumbled or just trailed off mid-sentence like we were all supposed to read his mind or something.
I remember in one lecture, he said something about getting our ducks in a row before we could touch base about the deliverables. And I'm frantically writing down ducks in a row and touch base, having absolutely no idea what ducks and baseball had to do with marketing strategy. I'm sitting there thinking, are we starting a duck farm? Are we playing baseball? What is happening right now? Later, much later, I learned these were just common business idioms, meaning get organized and check in. Who decided that made sense? Group discussions were even worse. Oh man, so much worse. When multiple native speakers talked over each other, interrupted constantly, used slang and referenced pop culture I wasn't familiar with, I felt completely, utterly lost, like I was watching a movie in a foreign language without subtitles. I would sit there nodding and smiling, pretending to understand, while internally having a full-blown panic attack about how far behind I was falling. It was exhausting. One day, after a particularly frustrating class where I understood maybe 30% of what was discussed, I broke down in my apartment. I called my mother in tears, telling her I had made this terrible mistake coming to America, that I wasn't smart enough, that I should just pack up and come home. But my mother, wise as always, gotta love moms, said something that completely changed my perspective. She said, "You're not failing because you lack intelligence. You're struggling because you're learning a completely new skill, listening to real English in real situations. That's totally different from classroom English. Give yourself time and practice deliberately." And you know what? She was absolutely right. I needed to stop beating myself up and start training my ears systematically. So I developed this whole plan to expose myself to as many real-life listening scenarios as possible. First, I started eavesdropping intentionally. Not to be creepy or nosy, but specifically to train my ear. I would sit in coffee shops, libraries, parks, and just listen to conversations around me. At first, I caught maybe one word in 5, just random words floating by. But gradually, as I learned to recognize common contractions like gonna, wanna, kinda, and these connected speech patterns, my comprehension started improving. I learned that native speakers almost never say going to as two distinct words. It becomes gonna, or sometimes just gun, depending on the speaker. Want to becomes wanna. Got to becomes gotta, and don't know becomes dunno. These weren't people being lazy with their pronunciation. This was just the natural rhythm of spoken English. Next, I started watching American TV shows and movies with a specific strategy. Instead of putting on subtitles in Portuguese like I'd always done before, I used English subtitles. This way, I could see how the words on screen related to the actual sounds I was hearing. Mind blown. I started recognizing patterns, how "what do you" often sounded like "would ya," how "let me" became "lemme," and how "give me" turned into "gimme." It was like cracking a secret code. I particularly loved watching sitcoms because the dialogue was super fast and colloquial, full of idioms and cultural references. When I didn't understand a phrase, I would pause, look it up, write it down in my notebook, and then continue. My notebook filled up with expressions like pull someone's leg, hit the hay, under the weather, and piece of cake. So many weird phrases. I also started listening to podcasts during my commute. I chose ones about topics I was genuinely interested in: true crime, comedy interviews, business stories. The great thing about podcasts was that I could replay difficult sections multiple times until I actually understood them. I would challenge myself to listen without looking at transcripts first, then check my understanding afterwards. One podcast I absolutely loved featured interviews with entrepreneurs. The host had this thick Southern accent, and his guests came from all over the world with their own accents. This exposed me to the reality that English isn't one uniform sound. It's this whole spectrum of accents, speeds, and speaking styles. Learning to understand a Scottish accent was completely different from understanding a Texan one, which was different again from an Indian accent. It was wild. But perhaps my most valuable learning experience came from forcing myself to engage in real conversations, even when it was super uncomfortable and scary. I joined a study group with native speakers. At first, I was absolutely terrified, like heart-pounding, sweaty palms terrified. I would often have to ask people to repeat themselves or speak more slowly, which was mortifying. But I learned something crucial. Most people were actually really happy to accommodate when I was honest about my needs. They weren't annoyed, they were understanding. I developed some strategies for conversations. Instead of just saying, "What?" when I didn't understand, which could sound kind of rude, I learned to say things like, "Sorry, could you repeat that?" Or, "I didn't catch that last part." Or, "Do you mean," followed by my best guess at what they said. This approach was way more polite and often led to much clearer communication. Oh, and speaking of challenges, if you're finding this helpful, if these stories are resonating with you, I would absolutely love it if you could hit that subscribe button. It really helps us create more content like this, and we can all grow together in this crazy English learning journey. Your support means everything. All right, let's keep going with more embarrassing stories. So, I also learned to pay attention to context clues. If I missed a word or phrase, sometimes I could infer the meaning from the conversation around it. I learned to watch people's facial expressions and body language, which often conveyed as much meaning as their actual words. One challenge I particularly struggled with, oh man, this one was brutal, was understanding phone conversations. Without visual cues and sometimes terrible audio quality, phone calls were incredibly difficult, like nightmare-level difficult. I remember calling to schedule a doctor's appointment, and the receptionist asked me something I absolutely could not understand. After having her repeated 3 times, I was so flustered and embarrassed that I just said yes and hoped for the best. Turns out she was asking if I had insurance, and my random yes led to this whole confusing situation at my actual appointment. The front desk person was like, "So where's your insurance card?" And I'm like, what insurance? It was a mess. After that embarrassing incident, I started practicing phone conversations specifically. I would call businesses with simple questions just to practice listening and responding. I learned that on the phone, it's especially important to confirm your understanding. Just to confirm, my appointment is on Tuesday at 2 p.m. Is that correct? That phrase became my lifeline. Another major listening challenge was understanding fast food workers and service staff who often spoke quickly and used restaurant-specific jargon. At Chipotle, when they asked brown or white, I initially had no idea what they were talking about. I'm thinking, brown or white what? Paper bags? Napkins? Rice. They meant rice. At Dunkin' Donuts, regular didn't mean plain coffee like I thought. It meant coffee with cream and sugar already in it. These were cultural and contextual meanings I had to learn through trial and error and lots of confusion. I started making a game of going to different restaurants and trying to understand the workers' questions on the first try. It became this personal challenge, and each small success was like a little victory that boosted my confidence. Group settings presented their own unique challenges. In my study group, when 5 or 6 people were all talking, sometimes over each other, sometimes interrupting, I had to learn to focus my attention strategically. I couldn't catch every word everyone said, so I learned to identify the main speakers and follow the thread of the conversation. I learned to recognize when someone was making a joke by their tone and the laughter that followed, even if I didn't always understand the joke itself. I did a lot of fake laughing in those early days, I'm not gonna lie. Sports bars were particularly challenging. Oh my God! The combination of background noise, excited shouting, sports terminology, and regional accents made them like advanced listening boot camps. But after forcing myself to watch a few games in those chaotic environments, my ability to filter out background noise and focus on specific voices improved dramatically. I also discovered that different regions had dramatically different speaking patterns. When I traveled to New York for a conference, the speed and directness of New Yorkers was jarring compared to Boston. They talked so fast. When I visited a friend in Georgia, the southern drawl and different idioms threw me off all over again. Each region was like learning English from scratch. Technical jargon in my field was another huge hurdle. In marketing classes, professors would throw around terms like synergy, pivot, bandwidth, circle back, and leverage in ways that had nothing to do with their literal meanings. We don't have the bandwidth for that didn't mean internet speed. It meant we don't have time or resources. This business English was like its own secret language within English. One strategy that really helped was recording lectures and listening to them multiple times. The first listen, I tried to understand the general idea. The second listen, I focused on catching specific details I'd missed. The third listen, I paid attention to how the professor structured their arguments and transitioned between ideas. This multi-pass approach was super time-consuming, but incredibly effective. I also started paying attention to thought markers and transition words that native speakers used to structure their speech. Phrases like, so basically, the thing is, what I mean is, and to put it another way, signaled that the speaker was about to clarify or summarize their point. Learning to recognize these markers helped me follow conversations even when I missed individual words. By the end of my first semester, my listening comprehension had improved so dramatically. I could follow most lectures without getting completely lost. I could participate in group discussions with actual confidence. I could understand movies and TV shows without subtitles most of the time. Phone calls were still challenging, but totally manageable. The breakthrough moment came during final presentations. A classmate gave this presentation full of rapid speech, idioms, and cultural references, and I understood everything. Not just the words, but the nuances, the humor, the implications. I even laughed at the right moments. After class, I walked home with tears in my eyes, just overwhelmed with pride at how far I'd come in just a few months. It was such an emotional moment. Looking back now, 3 years later, I realized that the struggle was absolutely worth it. Learning to listen to real English in real situations wasn't just about improving a language skill, it was about gaining the confidence to fully participate in my new life. It was about not letting fear of misunderstanding hold me back from friendships, opportunities, and experiences. My advice to anyone facing similar listening challenges is this: be patient with yourself, but also be proactive. Don't wait for your ears to magically adjust on their own. Deliberately expose yourself to challenging listening scenarios. Eavesdrop on conversations. Watch TV without subtitles. Listen to podcasts. Have real conversations even when they're difficult and awkward. Make phone calls. Go to noisy restaurants. Attend events where people speak quickly and casually.
And listen, don't be embarrassed to ask people to repeat themselves or speak more slowly. Most people are understanding and genuinely willing to help. The only way to get better at understanding real English is to immerse yourself in it. Mistakes, embarrassing moments, and all. Remember, every native speaker you hear has spent their entire life, literally decades, fine-tuning their listening skills in their native language. You're trying to catch up in months or years what took them their whole lives. Be proud of every improvement, no matter how small. Celebrate the moment you understand a fast-talking barista on the first try. Celebrate when you laugh at a joke in real time. Celebrate when you follow an entire group conversation without getting lost. Oh, and before we wrap up, if you've made it this far and found this helpful, please, please, please hit that subscribe button. Seriously, it helps us so much to keep creating content like this. Let's grow together in this English learning journey. Your support makes all the difference. These real-life listening challenges are tough. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but they're also the bridge between classroom English and actually living in English. Cross that bridge, even if it's scary, even if you stumble and fall flat on your face like I did. Chuckles. Because on the other side is the confidence, fluency, and connection you've been working toward all along. Your ears will sharpen, your comprehension will grow, and one day you'll realize that you're not translating anymore, you're just understanding. And that moment makes every frustrating, confusing, embarrassing listening challenge completely worth it. Thanks so much for hanging out with me and listening to all my embarrassing stories. I hope they helped you feel less alone in your struggles and gave you some practical strategies to try. Until next time, keep practicing, keep pushing yourself, and remember, every mistake is just a step toward fluency. Catch you in the next episode. Bye!